What's up, guys? How are we doing? We're going to wait till we get a couple more people in the chat to get this thing rolling. Madman and I have been thinking about this all day. We are very, very excited to talk some shop. And for those that do not know, we'll give it a little plug. We will be doing basketball this season. We're going to be doing some live after shows of games that happen. We're trying to, build out our network of getting some UCLA experts on here when it comes to basketball courts and just some fun things with that.
And Thriller and I are going to be at Poly too for a bunch of games as well. So it's going to be great.
I gotta love the West Side, just being so close, man. Rose Bowl, we'll go out to games, man, but that is a trek.
It's a trek.
I'm in Venice. Is it Chevio Hills? Is that like kind of?
Yeah, Chevio Hills, Westwood. Yep, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I did. That area always confused me because it was like Culver City. As somebody that just moved
West
out here.
LA. Yep.
Yeah. So, well, it looks like we got 10 people in the chat. We'll get this thing started. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What is up, guys, and welcome to the latest edition of the Bruin Bible. Will Decker, your host, joined by the man, the myth, the legend to my right, Mr. Jamal Madney in the house. And we had, an unfortunate weekend with the football game, but we're excited to talk to you guys about us moving forward with what's going on. Ironically, we were going to try to plan a trip to go to LSU, but given the current state of the team, I think it's in our best interest to not go out to this game, knowing what may be on the horizon for this. Madman, we're already dealing with some more injuries than we expected from last week. Jay Toia injured right now as it stands, which is a massive loss. And, it bothers me, Madman, because I think when people look at defensive linemen, they go, where are the sacks? Where are the sacks? When you're a defensive tackle, outside of the freak of natures, as it is the Aaron Donalds, the DeForest Buckners of the world, your job is to clog the lanes, for the offensive linemen, make it easy for your linebackers to come in and influence the run game and some other things. And Jay Toia, in recent memory, probably the best defensive tackle we've had since the great Kenny Clark, who's still in the NFL and humming today. So to lose him, Keanu Williams was on crutches in the Indiana game. And then our depth, Gary Smith was a very serviceable rotation player, is out as well. And kind of the tweet I had today, man, was, this could get really ugly. And we want to kind of buckle our seatbelts. As somebody that covers the university, you're an alumnus of this university. We're always pulling for the best interests of the Bruins and their fan base. But we also want to be completely transparent. Like, this is going to be a very, very tough season for UCLA. What were your first thoughts with Jay Toia heading to the injured reserve list? And how do we even fare moving forward without the likes of our key cog on the defense, man?
Yeah, Will, it was a really tough blow today to hear that and to sort of absorb it. I would go as far as saying it was probably the one guy that is most irreplaceable on this team. And, you and I talked about it in the offseason. Remember when Toia's flirtation kind of took place with the transfer portal, there was an opportunity to go to Texas for kind of a robust 6-figure amount. We had a show, we had a discussion around him being the most irreplaceable, individual and how that would sort of impact the entire defensive dynamic, the schematics and so forth. And I think we're back here, Will, because I think this is an even more significant loss, as crazy as it sounds, than if you lost Ethan Garbers, frankly, because if you just look at the composition of this defense, we're still sort of searching for answers on the edge. And so when you're searching for answers on the edge in terms of that front seven, you want to be able to hang your hat on the fact that you at least have sort of the interior taken care of. And when you lose Toia, and you said it so well, Will, with the defensive tackles, it really is that hockey assist. It's their play sets up the play, in that domino chain to then go get the statistics. So you can't look at a defensive tackle based on just stats and output. It's how they're setting up the output of others. And in that regard, Toia has just been absolutely phenomenal, as has Keanu Williams. And so there's sort of a 3-pronged effect here, Will. Number one is you lose these two guys. In addition to now you've got question marks on the interior as you do on the edge. So now your whole kind of defensive front is really questionable. Two, we know that depth is an issue, right, with this team in terms of kind of the drop off, particularly defensively, between, the first 2-3 guys and then that next wave. And so you're wondering, not just in terms of being able to lose Toia and Keanu Williams, but what a huge drop it's going to be and who's going to sort of replace them and their lack of experience. And then 3, this was already going to be a difficult matchup for the very reason that LSU brings in one of the best offensive lines in all of college football. I think that they preseason, many thought they were the best. I mean, they have 4 NFL quality offensive linemen in that first 5. 2 of them are on the big board here, Will, as top 15, top 16 picks in the first round. Okay.
Campbell,
in Campbell and Jones, right? And so, it was going to be their hands full with this defensive front with Campbell and Jones to begin with. Now you take away Toia and you take away Keanu Williams potentially. And I mean, how do you generate any sort of discomfort now, from a defensive perspective on Garrett Nussmeier? How do you try and clog up holes, for the run game? How do you sort of put pressure on him? I think we're staring into a situation right now, Will, that LSU probably only punts once in this game, if at all. I mean, that's kind of my over-under here, just because now the matchup between LSU's offensive line and UCLA's defensive line, there's such a chasm now that I think LSU is going to kind of be able to do what they want. The hope is going to be now on the back end that, you get physical with their receivers, they drop some passes, the linebackers come and contain. But in terms of that pure front, front to front, trenches to trenches, this is a wild mismatch now in terms of what UCLA's 4 is going to be versus what LSU's 5 is going to be.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough because when you have the caliber of offensive line, as you so eloquently laid out, that LSU does have, and Nussmeier is a above average quarterback. This guy can move the rock. I know 6 of his 10 touchdown passes did come against Nicholls State, but you look at the receivers and the quality of talent he's throwing to. Kyron Lacey is making an early case at maybe being a Blitnikoff front runner. 5 touchdowns in the first 3 games of the season. Mason Taylor might be the best tight end in the SEC right now. And Aaron Anderson, you can't leave him out. He's leading the team in catches overall. So you got just that kind of 3-headed monster in the receiving game. Nussmeier, obviously a highly recruited quarterback. But, man, just the sad reality of this, madman, that drives me crazy is this LSU team looks very beatable, if I'm being honest with you, man. Had we had the Chip Kelly team, I'm getting vibes of 2021. And the biggest thing with this LSU team that they just have not been able to get right since Brian Kelly has been there, this does not look like a defense that LSU has trotted out in quite a while. And, last year, they were kind of the SEC's version of what USC was across town, where they had the high-profile offense. They had a Heisman-winning quarterback, just like Caleb Williams was at USC, but they ranked respectively 108th in total defense for LSU and 121st in total defense for USC. They couldn't get anybody off the field. And through the early returns of the season, madman, if you study the tape and kind of figure it out, they lose the first game in kind of heartbreaking fashion to USC. They were up by 2 points to Nicholls State in the third quarter, 23-21. Nussmeier kind of found some more rhythm in the second half of that game, but Nicholls State was very much in that game. They let up a 65-yard run to the starting quarterback of Nicholls State to make that a 2-point contest. And then, my God, the South Carolina game last weekend may have been the best, game in college football all weekend. They score to take the lead with 1:12 left. South Carolina drives the extend the field. It's a 3-point game. South Carolina's got a 49-yard field goal attempt. They hook it just right, to prevent it from sending it to overtime. But you ask any Gamecocks fan, any college football fan, LSU got lucky to win that game entirely. I mean, that was South Carolina's W up until the last 2 minutes of the game. They kind of just imploded. So it was very unfortunate. I mean, it just gives you vibes of 2021 when they came in to the Rose Bowl, Ed Orgeron going, take off that sissy blue, and then we just beat them. It was such a magical time. That's still one of my favorite games we covered, within the LA Football Network. That was my first year, covering with this team. So such a bright memory. I'm going to pin this question back to you because obviously we have, Kiana, we got Toye out, Kafusi and Tapaki will likely take their spot in the defensive tackle rotation. But nobody's really expecting anything magical after the Indiana game. Let me pin this question back to you. What does success look like? Or how should we measure success in a game that feels unwinnable and untenable for UCLA football?
Yeah, Will, I mean, it's a great question. And I think, you so eloquently described the state of LSU because you said it best, Will. It was sort of a nip-tuck game with SC. I think truthfully, they lost that game more than SC won that game. They kind of had the lead there in the third quarter. They had a couple possessions where they could have made it 2 possessions. Nussmeier made some questionable throws at the end of that game where they could have really taken the lead again. And then you said it, Will. I mean, Nicholas State, it was 23-21 midway through the third. And I'll go one step further, Will. With South Carolina, they should have lost that game. Yeah. And it shouldn't even have come down to that field goal. If you recall, with about 6 minutes left in the game, Nussmeier threw an end-to-end pick six. It was a 100-yard pick six. And South Carolina got penalized for the guy that hit Nussmeier on the return. And Nussmeier was 20 yards away from the play. It had really nothing to do with it. There was kind of a boneheaded play and also kind of a questionable call because it wasn't a blindside hit. And so LSU got so lucky to win that South Carolina game. Otherwise, they would be staring at the barrel of 1-2. And you said it, Will. Challenges defensively for LSU. But even beyond that, there's a discipline issue with LSU right now. When you look at the number of penalties that they're getting, I mean, they're averaging 10-plus penalties over the first 3 games, and just boneheaded penalties like excessive celebrations, guys that just, totally self-inflicted. So there's a discipline challenge right now. There's a defense challenge right now. They absolutely look vulnerable coming back home here at 1-2, and they're kind of hoping that this becomes kind of a get-well game for them, but there's a lot of vulnerability. And so for me, Will, what success looks like is, are you able, 2 things. One is, given where they are defensively, can you move the ball on offense? I mean, if you're UCLA, are you getting into a position where Ethan Garbers is getting the ball into the hands of his playmakers? UCLA should be able to move the football. This should not be a 200 yards of total offense type of game. This should be a team that's north of 300, north of 350 against this LSU defense. So that's the first thing I'm looking for, is Garbers' ability to complete passes, get the ball to his playmakers, get them in space, and try and strain this defense that has looked very modest, very average at best with against limited competition. And again, Will, Nicholas State was vertically challenged. South Carolina was vertically challenged, right? They sort of gave up the big plays to SC at the end. So they haven't been used to sort of a team that can run and throw. And so what I'm really looking for offensively is a nice mix. This is a game and an opportunity for Eric Bieniemy to really reset the board. And I think this is a game where you want to go 50-50 in terms of run throw. You want to keep them balanced. You want to keep the defense honest and really sort of surprise them with big plays when they present themselves. And so that's number one. And number two, defensively, what I'm looking for is, can you kind of bend but don't break? Given where they are in terms of defensive line versus that offensive line, I think LSU is going to be able to move the ball pretty effortlessly in between the 20s. But then once you kind of get them into the red zone, the defensive line will, as long, from a pass rush perspective and all of that, those become kind of minimized to a certain extent, because now you're hoping for, there's space, there's a lot of crowd. Can you sort of manufacture field goals instead of touchdowns? Maybe they get a little undisciplined. There becomes kind of a 2nd and 15 from the 20, becomes a 1st and 20 from, the 25. Can you sort of manufacture some scenarios where you can try and get them into the red zone and force some field goals instead of touchdowns? So those are kind of the 2 things I'm looking for, Will. And can you try and sort of stay in the game that way, where you're like, listen, we're going to have to keep scoring to stay with them. And then can we kind of find, those half a stops, instead of field goals instead of touchdowns and so forth. So those are the 2 things that I'm looking for. And if they can do that, we're starting to trend in the right direction.
Completely agree, man. And I want to see AP. You just left us a really nice comment. A lot of people are trying to trust Bieniemy's offense, and they show flashes, but they take too dang long in the huddle. And for the play to develop in general, we have no tempo and eat themselves on offense. And we went to Big Ten Media Day. Ryan Dyrud, the founder of LAFB, and myself were in Indianapolis. And the one common thread I made sure to ask, Ethan Garbers and J. Mike was how were they adjusting to the offense? And without hesitation, they both told me, it was incredibly difficult to start. And they're still learning that. So I think the faster you can process the offense and kind of master into it, the more of an opportunity you have a chance to start winning football games and do it at a high level. And it's looked lost. The first half of Hawaii looked completely lost. Most of the game, looked lost. We did have that nice TJ Harden touchdown run that got called back. That would have been a huge momentum. The line played a little bit better, but still there was a lot of – it's still been an incredible, difficult scenario for UCLA football to generate the run game for themselves. 167 yards over 2 games, under 4 yards a carry at the college level is kind of insane when you think about it, especially with what we were dealing with before in a Chip Kelly offense. So them generating some semblance of a run offense and building that confidence, and maybe it's not, the 85 Bears defense out there, but it's still LSU, and it's still a brand name you can kind of hang your hat on and go, hey, if we can move the ball against LSU, I know a lot of these guys were 4, maybe even 5-star recruits. We can do this against anybody. It's just a confidence-building scenario that you can do with that. And I think the other point I would make is if this team really wants to get it going, yes, it's mastering Bieniemy's offense, but, man, it's also converting third down conversions, man. 6 of 21 through the first, 2 games. That is a 28% conversion on third downs. If we can just make a jump in there, even if we're closer to 40%, that's a huge leap. And that can eventually maybe lead to more scoring drives on the offensive end. The big fork in the road for me personally is the Bieniemy offense. I just think it's been too complicated, too complex.
Yes.
I've had a lot of sources, off the record kind of tell me the same thing. What has been your, thoughts on the Bieniemy offense? I know we kind of touched about it after the Indiana game a little bit, but I want to hear it kind of laid out a little bit more as we head into LSU. Your overall thoughts on Bieniemy, because we talked about it. Eddie is talking about it right now. He says had no hand in the Chiefs' offense. He was just kind of there. We're starting to kind of, think about that a little bit more as Andy Reid is kind of the mastermind behind that. But I want to see Bieniemy and kind of what allowed him to be in the same room as these people play out. Give me your thoughts on Bieniemy's offense.
Yeah, Will, I think it sort of what's interesting about Bieniemy's offense is, from what I see, is it doesn't really have a framework. And what I mean by that is it doesn't seem like there are core concepts that he wants to sort of establish. And then you have variation off of those core concepts. Like when you think about a run and shoot offense or a West Coast offense or an air raid offense or, a power offense, there's 2 or 3 concepts that sort of come to light. And so for instance, concept could be, listen, it's all about creating the right one-on-one matchups of being able to get your playmakers in space and going one-on-one. Or another concept is really being able to get your running backs to be in a downhill type of environment more often than not. Or another concept is it's really all about horizontal movement and sort of moving the pocket and the quarterback and doing things off of play action. Getting your quarterback on the run and doing some sort of misdirection from a horizontal standpoint, having some people going one way, other people going another way. You create pick plays, you create sort of space through that. And then you sort of have variation off of those concepts where you're like, okay, I'm going to stack 3 on the right to get this sort of one-on-one matchup. I had 2 of them go deep, 1 go short. Now I'm going to have sort of a more complex route tree that counters all of that, right? It's kind of like the basketball equivalent of, hey, I showed you the fadeaway, then I'm going to show you the up and under off the fadeaway. Now that you know that the fadeaway is there and the up and under, now I'm going to give you a little dream shake, show you something laterally, right? It's the move off of the move. And great offensive minds, they have this framework of like, these are the 3 concepts I kind of want to have and then I'm going to build variation off of that. And what that does is two things. It makes the offense very structured in terms of very intentional of getting the right matchups and getting you to do what you want the guys to do. But then B, it sort of simplifies the comprehension, right? Of saying, okay, this is kind of what we're trying to do. And this is just a variation off of that. And guys kind of learn it and adopt it at the same time. With Bieniemy's offense at the start of this season, it just feels like one place formation is just completely different than the next place formation. And that's completely different than the third formation. So it doesn't seem like there's like a cohesive framework or a concept or set of concepts that he's trying to exploit. He's just trying to kind of do everything. And in trying to do everything, he's kind of doing nothing right now as a result. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing guys that are confused. You're seeing guys that don't have a lot of flow. You're seeing guys that are very tentative. And that's where kind of the turnovers and the hesitation is coming from. So what I'd love to see from Bieniemy is, really kind of establishing some core concepts and then generating variation off of that. And I think, Will, I know you didn't ask me about this, but I'll sort of just add it on. I think from the other side of the ball with Ikaika Malloy, I think this is also sort of an opportunity to have variation, right? Based on your personnel as well. So I think there's an opportunity for him to kind of get in the shop and say, you know what? We're down our two best interior linemen. We have no pass rush right now. How do I attack this? And I think the way, if he's really kind of locked in and tuned in, I would actually come in, Will, and I'd rush 3 and drop 8. Because I'm not going to get the pass rush anyway. And so what I would want to do is I'd want to rush 3, drop 8, kind of the way Jed Fish did last year, against the USCs and against, that's kind of how Arizona went on this run. And what you're doing there is you're saying, I'm going to give up all the underneath stuff. And if they're going to score, I'm going to make them go 12 plays, 14 plays, 15 plays. I'm going to make them take up 5, 6, 7 minutes. And eventually what happens there is you're doing two things. You're shortening the game, so it's fewer possessions. So even if you are giving up the scores, the game isn't getting so out of hand because you have less possessions. And B, you're making a team that is struggling with discipline to be able to execute 10, 11, 12, 13 plays in a row without penalties, without getting off schedule. And that's how you can sort of manufacture stops and stay in the game. So for me, I'm looking for Bieniemy to sort of generate a framework offensively. And Malloy, hopefully he's also kind of thinking and saying, look, given my personnel and given who I'm playing, let's sort of maybe abandon kind of just the standard structure of the way we're doing things. This could be the day to just rush 3 and drop 8.
I completely agree because the run game for LSU has struggled to generate. They had John Emery, who, believe it or not, was thinking about transferring to UCLA at one point. Season-ending injury in the opening game. He was presumed the number 1 back there. And they only have one rusher through 3 games over 100 yards, 78 carries as a team, Madman, 313 yards, 4 yards a carry. To put that in perspective, UCLA is averaging about 3.6, 3.7 yards a carry. So they're kind of in the same ballpark when it comes to the rushing attack. It's been a pass-happy system so far with Garrett Nussmeier. Why not drop 8? I think that's probably the best method because, like you said, I had questions about these edge rushers coming in. We got maybe a little bit more pressure than we thought we would against Hawaii, but it kind of reflected back to form against a Big Ten offensive line. Get your guys back, have them play. If you got a Kyron Lacey back there, make sure you're guarding like 2 people on Lacey at once, as this guy has been unstoppable through 3 games of action. They had that 3-headed monster we're talking about within the receiving room. And Madman, it's been so, dead within the UCLA Twitter. I want to just give one little positive. There's been 2 guys that I think deserve, a round of applause for what they've been doing because they've actually played very good football despite the team on offense and defense not playing so great. The first guy, man, Kane Medrano has been so good. And we talked about him at the beginning of the season. He had 3 tackles for a loss by himself in that Indiana game. With those interior defensive tackles out, I'm really looking for them to send him off the edge a little bit more, generate more pressure. You remember the Hawaii game. We sent him off the edge. He hits Braden Shager mid-throw, turns into an interception, forces the turnover. That wasn't an accident. Kane Medrano makes plays like that all the time. leading the team in individual tackles, leading the team in tackles for a loss. We said this guy's got a shot at an NFL future before the season started, and boy, is he living up to it. He's been really, really outstanding. So I want to give a shout out there. And then, the other guy that's made plays, KJ Wallace as, a slot corner. 4 passes deflected in 2 games. Like, this guy is not your average slot corner, transfer from Notre Dame, transfer from Georgia Tech. I thought he's played outstanding in the limited amount of coverage snaps we've got to see him play. So I'd love to see a little bit more of KJ Wallace. And yes, I know it feels like the house is burning behind us, but every now and then you got to shout out some of the guys that are doing good things. And I think those guys have been outstanding. I'm going to leave you with this, Madman. Give me the final prediction for the game, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about defense as well. Do you think Ilkaika Malloy can show more of what, even without your Jay Toyes and without your Keanu Williams, can we reflect more of that DeAnton Lynn defense that he was taught last year, and nothing has really changed schematically from that? Can we see more of that style of defense, maybe in the LSU game?
Yeah, Will, no, it's a great question. And so happy that, first of all, Will, that you shouted out Medrano and Wallace. They've been outstanding. And Medrano is quickly rising draft boards here, Will. I mean, we're talking about a legitimate NFL, draft pick here, and he's rapidly rising. And I think KJ Wallace has been just phenomenal. And you and I, it's great to see these guys sort of come home on the narrative arcs when we sort of talk about them in the offseason. We talked about his big game experience, how much he played the Georgias and the Ole Misses, playing for Tech, that it really shows his big game experience, and he's really come through in a significant way. Will, I think this is sort of an opportunity for Malloy to do a couple of things. One is, to sort of the earlier point, if you drop 8, you're getting more of your quality playmakers involved, right? So we talked about, look, KJ Wallace, Ramon Henderson. We talk about Davies, Kirkwood, but then John Vaughns gets to play more kind of safety than linebacker. You get Oladija out in some space as well. You get Ali Cahow out in some space as well. So you're sort of getting some guys, your primary playmakers, sort of more on the back end, and it's sort of more conducive to what you're doing. And then I think the other sort of ace in the hole here, Will, from a defensive perspective, if I'm Malloy, wouldn't this be the game to have the Collins Achempong coming out party?
Oh,
right?
Man.
We've been waiting for. He's an absolute physical freak. He hasn't had a lot of reps. We saw in fall ball, Will, end of spring, fall ball, we thought for sure he was going to be on the edge, and we thought he was going to be our answer to the edge at the start of the year, just given what his frame was, what his skill set was. And then we kind of sneakily saw him on that interior, if you recall. And we had kind of the likes of Medrano and Oladipo kind of rushing the edge by committee in various packages. This could be the game of Collins Achempong, where he sort of puts it together. And what's better than sort of on-the-job training? You're kind of like, look, you haven't played a lot. Just go and wreak havoc. We'll figure out the playbook later. Why don't you just go, cut it loose, wreak havoc, let your physical ability shine, and you're getting on-the-job training against a quality SEC opponent in one of the toughest places to play. So I think if I'm Malloy, I kind of say, let's rush 3. And let's just see what Achempong has, and let's see what we can sort of generate. And if we're getting something from Achempong, maybe then I sort of bring more up front, bring more in the box, and it becomes balanced. And if I'm not, I stay back 8. So I think there are some D'Anton Lynn-esque concepts that can work here, particularly with Achempong.
Yeah, and I thought Malloy really deployed a really great second half defense against Hawaii. I'm hoping he can bring that back in game number 3. I'm glad you brought up Achempong, man, because when we saw him in spring football, even though he was on a field away from us, it was like watching Bigfoot from afar, just the way this man is built. 6'7", 285 pounds. I mean, that is size level that you cannot teach. Former basketball players got some sweet feet down there. I would love just to see some potential of this guy, especially against a freakish unit, if you will, on the LSU offensive line. 2 other guys I want to see, man. We had 2 transfer tackles and edges come in. Sheriff Saye coming from Florida A&M. I'm ready to see him play. Not a lot of snaps there with Alpew and our guy Jacob Busich on the other side. And what about Drew Tuazama, man? This guy was good enough to go play for Shane Beamer at South Carolina. I want to see it, man. Give me some Tuazama. Give me some Achampong. I need some Saye back there. Let's see it, man. We have some depth that we added. I want to see it. These guys, all three were transfers from the offseason. I think we're ready to kind of see what happens there. I think success for me, Madman, is this defense gets stops. We talked about at length, the 9 of 12 on third downs Indiana was. Just getting some stops would mean so much to this defense moving forward. And for offense, this isn't a particularly great defense. It may have some talented players. Can we finally find a way to generate a run game? There was inches in close, scenarios where we felt like we were close to generating that run game. I talked about that TJ Harden touchdown that got called back. Can we get that going just enough where we can get maybe a burst of energy to this offense through the run game? And the run game opens up the pass, as we talked about extensively. So the whole offense can flow a little bit better if that run game works. I think it's probably going to be about 42 to 17. I think a good game for us would be 42-28, similar to like Nicholls State, where in the third quarter it's a close ball game. LSU eventually pulls away. But if you can just, inject some confidence into this team right now, because it was so playing without it, last week at the Indiana game, give us any semblance of confidence moving forward. And maybe on the back half of the season, we can surprise some people. But that's kind of my prediction. 42-17 as it stands. If you can make it 42-28, there's a lot to build upon. What do you think about that? And give me your prediction before we get on out of here, my man.
No, Thriller, I love it. And I love the element there that you mentioned about the run game, because, again, it sort of goes back to that point. Can you sort of be 50-50? And I think where LSU has been susceptible, Will, is to sort of the explosive back. And so, when you look at how SC sort of was able to kind of get into LSU a little bit, it was sort of a combination of Zach Branch early kind of in space and then Woody Marks late. And then when you sort of looked at Nicholls State, you mentioned they hit a couple of big home runs, in the first, second quarter of that game to kind of stay in it. And then you saw South Carolina, right? You saw some great run game there from South Carolina, big gashes. And so to me, this is going to be, is there an opportunity for TJ Harden to kind of see the field and be able to make some moves? But again, and I'm going to keep going back to the well until it actually sort of comes back, this is screaming like a Keegan Jones game, right? I mean, when you talk about the explosiveness and the gashes and the things that you can do, I mean, I would love to see Bieniemy just hand it off to Keegan as sort of a lead back for a few rushes here, particularly against an LSU defense that is susceptible to the gash run play. And so that's a great point there, Will. So funny you mentioned 42-17. My score was 38-20. I feel like it's going to be 38-20. I think that UCLA is going to be able to do enough defensively to be able to at least make these longer drives. And I think LSU is also going to kind of shoot themselves in the foot in certain instances where, the score is going to be relatively modest. And I think for UCLA, again, being able to move the ball, generate a competitive game for 2.5 quarters, and then kind of see where the chips take you, so to speak. That's kind of what I'm looking for here, Will, moving forward. And so I think it'll be interesting, the ebbs and flows of this particular game. You got to think LSU's mindset is, hey, we haven't really put together a good game yet this season. Is this the game to sort of jumpstart our season? And I think from a UCLA perspective, it's, look, let's keep them where they are. They got two great receivers, to your point. The running game is still very much in question. So that allows you to sort of stay in the game. I think 38-20 is where I'm leaning.
38-20, that's a great call. Listen, if we can get even closer than that somehow, I think there's a lot to take from this game, especially at Baton Rouge. So let's hope for the best. It has not been an ideal start. We'll be the first to admit that. But, man, trajectory and how you move forward from things starts now, man. You can't live in the past. You got to live in the future. Get out there, man. Make some plays, and let's hope UCLA can at least be in a better spot next week than where they are currently today. You guys have a great rest of your evening. We'll be talking to you guys soon. We're going to be doing a live show. Madman's actually having his first child with his wife, Ashley, potentially this upcoming weekend, guys. So give him all your love, give him all your prayers. It's a, safe and healthy birth. We're so excited for you, brother. And, it's just going to be a life-changing moment in the best way possible, dude.
No,
So,
thank you so much, brother. And, it's special when we've got great friends and loved ones like you in our life. And so it's a sort of a magical time. So I'm kind of on baby watch here the next couple of days. Baby might come during UCLA LSU. The baby might be the special good luck, for the miracle in Baton Rouge, so we can hope, we can dream about it. And perhaps our next show might be live from Cedars-Sinai Hospital. So, stay tuned.
Stay tuned, guys. You guys have a great rest of your evening. Much love and prayers. Fours up, guys.